Reptilian Invasion. Unveiling the Lizard People's Attack on Our Water Supply. Chapter 1. Unraveled threads. The pale glow of the computer screen cast eerie shadows on James's determined face. His fingers flew across the keyboard, leaving no digital trace as he accessed the darkest, most secretive corners of the web. The room was silent except for the occasional tap of a key, the silent hum of the machine, and the ticking of the grandfather clock by the doorway. James had spent years in these digital realms, but recently, there had been whispers of something vast and ominous. Reptilians, once only a conspiracy, had made their move on Congress. Now, more than ever, every suspicious thread on the web felt like a lifeline to understanding their next move. Suddenly, James's eyes locked onto a fragmented sentence on a hastily deleted post. Water is the key. Remember Earth Day. Earth Day? James whispered to himself, archiving the page before it vanished. It was cryptic, but his instincts sensed its weight. Knowing he couldn't unravel this alone, he picked up his phone and dialed a familiar number. Tommy George picked up after the second ring. James? It's 2 a.m. This better be good. It is, James replied, urgency evident in his tone. I've found something. Meet me at our spot. Bring your laptop. 20 minutes later, James and Tommy sat across from each other in a dimly lit, old library, a place where the digital world met the analog, a safe space away from prying eyes. James shared the cryptic message. Tommy's fingers raced across his laptop as he ran a decryption program. Whoever posted this used a dead man's switch. The post was set to delete seconds after posting. They wanted someone to see it, but not for long, Tommy said. But why Earth Day? What does water have to do with reptilians? James pondered aloud. Before Tommy could answer, the library's old wooden door creaked open. Both men turned to see a figure cloaked in shadows. As it approached, the overhead light revealed a worn face with determined eyes. You're not the only ones trying to connect the dots, the stranger whispered, placing a sealed envelope on the table. The front read, "For those who seek the truth." James opened it cautiously, pulling out a series of photos. They depicted various water facilities, all with a common element, a strange, hieroglyph-like symbol painted discreetly on a wall or a fence. The stranger broke the silence. They're everywhere. Watching. Waiting. But water is their weakness, and Earth Day is when they plan to strike. Tommy squinted at the newcomer. Who are you? The stranger simply replied, a friend. Someone who believes in what you're doing. With that, he turned and walked away, disappearing as quietly as he'd appeared. James and Tommy exchanged glances, the weight of their discovery pressing down on them. They're planning something big, Tommy. Bigger than Congress. We need to act, and we need to act fast, James whispered, gripping the photos tighter. Tommy nodded, his eyes reflecting the fire of determination. Let's unravel this mystery, James. Before it's too late. With that, the two men plunged deeper into a conspiracy that spanned not only their city but the entire nation. The fight against the reptilians had only just begun, and the stakes were higher than ever. Chapter 2. Beneath surface tensions. Dawn's first light revealed a city unaware of the looming threats beneath its streets. Life went on as usual. Cars honked, cafes bustled, and children laughed. But James and Tommy were on a different plane of reality, one where shadows spoke truths and walls whispered secrets. Having spent the night cross-referencing the water facilities from the photos with city maps, they found a pattern. The marked facilities formed a peculiar pattern, a pentagram. At its center was the city's largest reservoir. James looked up from the map, concern evident in his eyes. We need to scout this reservoir, Tommy. If there's a central point to their plan, this is it. Dressed in inconspicuous attire, they took Tommy's old van to the reservoir. Armed with binoculars and hidden cameras, they planned to gather as much evidence as possible. The reservoir, enveloped by a dense forest and safeguarded by a towering iron fence, seemed innocuous. But as James peered through his binoculars, he spotted the same hieroglyph-like symbol from the photos. It was painted discreetly on a utility shed. Suddenly, a crackling sound echoed through their earpieces. It was the voice of their informant, the stranger from the library. Remember, they're masters of disguise. Trust nothing and no one. As the day wore on, they noticed a recurring event. Every hour, a utility truck would enter, its occupants flashing a badge to the security before proceeding. But it wasn't the badge that caught James's attention, it was the cold, unblinking eyes of the drivers. As dusk approached, James made a bold move. He approached the fence, using wire cutters to create an entry point. "Stay close and stay silent," he whispered to Tommy. Inside, they moved stealthily towards the utility shed. It was eerily quiet, save for the distant hum of machinery and the soft lapping of the reservoir waters. Inside the shed, a scene from a sci-fi horror unraveled. Tubes and strange equipment, glowing with an eerie blue light, connected the reservoir's water to large glass cylinders. Inside those cylinders, swirling silver mists formed the same hieroglyph-like symbols. Before they could process the scene, footsteps approached. They quickly hid behind barrels, peering out just enough to see two figures entering, both with the distinctive cold, reptilian eyes. "We're nearly ready," hissed one. "By Earth Day, the water will carry our essence to every home. The transformation will be complete." His companion nodded, adjusting a dial on one of the machines. The water in the cylinders bubbled more furiously. Suddenly, a radio crackled to life. "Sector 7 reports an intrusion at the west fence." The reptilians turned, their gaze scanning the shed. "Find them," one commanded, his voice dripping with malice. James signaled Tommy, and the two began retreating, but their every step felt like a gamble. As they neared their entry point, a searchlight illuminated the area, casting long, sinister shadows. Tommy's foot snagged on a coil, causing a loud clang. Instantly, alarms blared, and the once quiet compound was ablaze with activity. "Run!" James yelled, pulling Tommy to his feet. As they sprinted, the once human security guards, now with slits for eyes and scales emerging on their skin, were in pursuit. Their hisses filled the air, echoing the very nightmares that plagued James. The forest became their ally as they dodged and weaved between trees. They reached the van, engine roaring to life just as a guard lunged, missing James's door by mere inches. The city lights ahead offered sanctuary. But as they caught their breath, the reality of their discovery weighed heavily. The water, the very essence of life, was under threat. And time was running out. "Earth Day is only a week away," Tommy said, looking at the calendar. "We need a plan, and we need it now." James nodded, determination burning in his eyes. "We've seen their operations. Now, we expose them and save the city." Their journey into the depths of the Reptilian conspiracy had only just begun, but both men knew that the fight for their city's soul was a fight they could not afford to lose. Chapter 3. Shrouded Deceptions. The night was ripe with tension as James and Tommy drove through the city's maze-like streets. The neon lights did little to quell the darkness that felt like it was seeping into their souls. They had seen firsthand the dangers that lurked beneath, and the weight of their responsibility weighed heavily on them. James's apartment had always been a haven, a place he'd go to unwind from his investigative pursuits. But now, as they ascended the building and entered his dimly lit living room, it transformed into a command center. A large board with pictures, maps, and interconnecting threads dominated one wall. Tommy hesitated at the door, taking in the gravity of their situation. "This is bigger than anything we've ever dealt with," he said, a hint of trepidation in his voice. James, pouring 2 glasses of whiskey, replied, "This is our city, Tommy. We owe it to everyone to expose these creatures and their nefarious plans." They moved towards the board, piecing together all the information they'd gathered. The images from the reservoir, the tubes, the cylinders with the swirling mists, and the hieroglyphs, played over in their minds. James broke the silence. "We need allies. We're dealing with beings who've existed since time immemorial. Their reach is vast, their resources, infinite. He dialed a number, one he'd been reluctant to use. The other end picked up after a few rings. It's James. I need to meet. The following evening, they found themselves at a decrepit warehouse in the city's old district. Waiting for them was Catherine, a renowned journalist known for uncovering governmental conspiracies. She was also James's ex-partner, both in work and love. Their past was turbulent, but mutual respect remained. She greeted them coldly. I heard about the Congress incident. How deep are you in this? James handed her the evidence they'd collected. As she examined the pictures, her stoic facade crumbled. Reptilians. The legends are true then. Catherine had come across fragmented tales of these beings during her investigations. They've been here, biding their time. Your discovery, James, it's the missing link. They strategized late into the night. Their best bet was to infiltrate one of the marked water facilities and gather solid evidence that would be irrefutable. Catherine had contacts in the tech world. By the next day, they had state-of-the-art equipment, hidden cameras, sound recorders, and a small drone. The chosen facility was in the heart of the city, masked by the guise of a regular water treatment plant. Under the cover of night, they embarked on their mission. Tommy, with his experience in surveillance, handled the drone. Catherine and James, using their press credentials, tried for a more direct approach. As they neared the main entrance, they felt the atmosphere change, a palpable shift in the air. They were met by a guard whose features were too symmetrical, too perfect. His cold, unblinking eyes studied them. State your business. Catherine confidently flashed her badge. Routine inspection. We've received reports of water contamination. The guard hesitated momentarily before pressing a button, granting them access. Inside, the facility was vast. Massive tanks towered above them, with pipes running in all directions. But it was too normal, too mundane. Where was the equipment they had seen at the reservoir? Suddenly, a door at the far end opened, and out stepped a figure, his face unmistakably reptilian, his scales shimmering under the overhead lights. James and Catherine hid behind a tank, hearts pounding. The reptilian spoke into a communicator. Begin the next phase. The solstice aligns with Earth Day. The energy will amplify our essence in the water. As he left, Catherine whispered, we need to find their central operation room. Guided by Tommy through earpieces, who was monitoring through the drone, they navigated the maze-like facility. They stumbled upon a room, the hum of machines resonating from within. Inside, they witnessed a horrifying sight. Workers, their human forms shifting into reptilian, were channeling a glowing liquid into the facility's water supply. At the center stood a crystal, emanating an otherworldly energy. They began recording, capturing every detail. But just as they were about to retreat, an alarm blared. The voice of the reptilian from earlier echoed, intruders in Sector 3. Panic surged. They were trapped, with only one exit. Catherine, thinking quickly, pulled out a small device. Smoke bombs. It'll give us cover. As smoke filled the room, they sprinted towards the exit. But the reptilians were closing in. Just as hope seemed lost, the drone, piloted by Tommy, swooped in, creating a diversion. They burst out of the facility, gasping for breath. Tommy, van revving, was waiting. Time to go, he shouted. They peeled away from the facility, the alarm still blaring in the distance. In the safety of the van, they reviewed the evidence they'd gathered. It was undeniable. The reptilians were manipulating the city's water supply, preparing for some grand scheme on Earth Day. As the night unfolded, they knew they had to act fast. They had the evidence, but exposing the reptilians meant going public, risking their own lives and the lives of countless others. The next chapter of their harrowing journey would be fraught with danger and deception. Shrouded deceptions had exposed the extent of the reptilian plot, but it had also made them enemies of a powerful and ancient foe. Chapter 4. Cryptic waters. Rain cascaded over the city, washing away the grime of the streets, but the dirt of deception still lingered in the air. James's eyes darted to the rearview mirror every few seconds, ensuring they weren't being followed. Tommy drove with white-knuckle intensity, the engine roaring beneath them, urging them further into the night. Catherine was huddled in the backseat, transferring the data they'd captured to a secure drive. The glow from her laptop was the only source of light inside the van, casting eerie shadows across their faces. "We need to lay low," Tommy murmured, navigating the serpentine alleys. "We've rattled their cage. They'll be searching." The van took a sharp turn, and they found themselves by the waterfront, the pitter-patter of rain creating a rhythm on the metal roof above. Tommy shut off the engine, and a heavy silence settled. "They've been in the shadows for centuries, just legends whispered in darkened rooms," Catherine murmured, gazing out at the stormy waters. "And now they're on the brink of an unmasking. We have what we need. We expose them. Warn the world," James responded, determination in his voice. But just as hope began to flicker, a chilling reality dawned upon them. Their recordings, while incriminating, might not be enough. In an era of deepfakes and distrust, how could they guarantee their evidence would be believed? Catherine's voice cut through James's thoughts. "We need something. Irrefutable. A live specimen." Tommy's brows knitted together. "That's playing with fire. You've seen what they can do." But James nodded in agreement. "She's right. We need the world to see them. We need to capture one." Their next steps were clear, but fraught with danger. Using their intelligence, they determined the best location for this daring capture would be the city's old canal system, a dilapidated network of underground waterways rumored to be a transit point for the Reptilians. Equipped with nets, tranquilizers, and a makeshift cage, the trio descended into the bowels of the city. The sound of dripping water echoed through the cavernous tunnels, their path illuminated only by the weak beams of their flashlights. They had to split up, covering more ground. James ventured deeper, each step taking him further into the belly of an unknown world. He strained his ears, listening for any movement. And then he heard it, a soft, deliberate splash, followed by a dragging sound. Drawing closer, his light fell upon a horrific scene. A group of reptilians, their scaly skin glistening, were ushering a group of humans, seemingly entranced, into a chamber. These humans, dazed and confused, had tubes connected to them, draining some form of energy. Suppressing his horror, James sent a silent alert to Tommy and Catherine. They had to act fast. He targeted a lone reptilian overseeing the operation, waiting for the right moment. When the creature turned away, James lunged, throwing the net and jamming the tranquilizer into its flesh. A guttural hiss escaped the reptilian as it struggled, but the tranquilizer took effect quickly. Tommy and Catherine arrived just in time to help cage their captive. However, the sounds of the struggle had drawn attention. Reptilian reinforcements were closing in. "We need a diversion," Catherine exclaimed, rummaging in her bag. Pulling out a small explosive, she tossed it down an adjoining tunnel. The blast, though not fatal, sent the approaching reptilians into disarray. The trio, using the chaos to their advantage, made their escape, dragging their unconscious captive behind them. The journey back was fraught with danger. Each shadow, each sound posed a potential threat. Emerging into the early dawn, they loaded their captive into their van and drove to a secluded location, a cabin in the woods, away from prying eyes. The reptilian, bound and sedated, was a sight to behold in the clear light of day. It was a specimen of nightmares, yet they couldn't deny the intelligence in its eyes. As it began to stir, the trio braced themselves. They were on uncharted territory, conversing with a creature of legend. But they needed answers, and their captive held the key. Little did they know, this conversation would unearth secrets about the reptilian agenda that would shake their very understanding of reality. The war for water was just the beginning. The day's revelations would set the stage for confrontations and truths that neither James, Tommy, nor Catherine were prepared for. But for now, They had their evidence, and the world would soon know the truth. Chapter 5. The serpent's tongue. The cabin's interior was dim, the only illumination being the slivers of dawn that pierced through the gaps in the wooden boards. Dust motes floated in the beams of light, creating a surreal atmosphere. James, Catherine, and Tommy stood at a safe distance from the caged reptilian, which was beginning to awaken from its forced slumber. The creature's eyes flickered open, revealing vertical, slitted pupils that contracted and expanded as they adjusted to the light. It hissed, the sound echoing in the stillness as it strained against its bindings. James took a deep breath, trying to quell the anxiety bubbling within him. They had captured a creature straight out of humanity's nightmares, and now they were about to converse with it. His voice trembled as he approached. "Can you understand me?" For a long moment, the reptilian didn't respond. Then, slowly, it nodded, its forked tongue darting out briefly. The gesture was almost human. "Why are you here?" Tommy's voice broke the silence, his tone both defiant and wary. The creature hesitated, its eyes scanning each one of them, as if gauging their intentions. Then, in a voice that was raspy yet articulate, it replied, "To survive. Just like you." James took a step forward, his gaze unflinching. "Survive? By draining humanity? By taking our resources?" The reptilian's eyes narrowed. "Your understanding is limited. We are not your enemy." Catherine interjected, her voice filled with skepticism. "You infiltrate our society, our Congress, manipulate our systems for your gain, and you expect us to believe you're not a threat?" "We have existed alongside you for millennia," the creature responded, its voice dripping with an age-old weariness. "The universe is vast. We sought refuge on your planet after ours was destroyed." Tommy looked incredulous. "So, you just decided to take over our planet, our resources?" The reptilian shook its head slowly. "We did not want to take over. We wanted to coexist. But your world, your systems, they are so easily corrupted." James's eyes flashed with anger. "You think you can justify your actions by blaming our system's weaknesses?" The creature sighed, the sound almost human in its melancholy. "You have only seen a fragment of our existence. We did not wish for confrontation. But the thirst is insatiable." Catherine frowned, confusion evident on her face. "Thirst? For what?" "For energy," the reptilian replied, its gaze distant. "We feed on it. Your planet is a beacon, rich in life force. The water is our conduit." Tommy's eyes widened in realization. "That's why you're after the waterworks. The water amplifies the energy you feed on." The creature nodded. "It is a symbiosis. We purify the water, drawing energy in the process. But something is altering the balance." James leaned in, curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" The reptilian hesitated, its gaze darting to the window as if expecting to see something or someone. "Not all of us agree on our methods. Some wish to dominate, to control. They have altered the water, made it toxic to your kind." Catherine's face paled. "You mean our water is poisoned?" The creature nodded gravely. "The balance must be restored. But time is running out." James felt a chill run down his spine. The implications were staggering. "We need to warn people. We need to stop this." The reptilian's gaze bore into James's, a plea evident in its eyes. "Help us restore the balance, and we will ensure your species' survival." Tommy and Catherine exchanged uneasy glances. Could they trust this creature? The weight of their decision pressed heavily upon them. As they grappled with their options, a sudden noise outside the cabin made them all freeze. The rustling of leaves, the soft tread of footsteps. They were no longer alone. Tommy motioned to the window, signaling for silence. The next moments felt like an eternity as the trio waited, their breaths held. Suddenly, the door was kicked open, revealing a group of armed individuals, their faces obscured by dark hoods. But their eyes, Those slitted reptilian eyes left no doubt as to their identity. The leader stepped forward, his gaze falling on the captive reptilian. "You have something that belongs to us." James's heart raced. They were outnumbered, outgunned. But surrender was not an option. The room was charged with tension, every second dragging on, every outcome a dance between hope and despair. The battle for Earth's water had just begun, and the stakes had never been higher. As the first shot rang out, the course of humanity's future hung in the balance. Chapter 6. Whispers in the water. The deafening echo of the gunshot faded, replaced by a chilling silence. The room felt like it had been sucked into a void, time stretching and bending. Everyone's eyes were fixated on the cabin door, where the leader of the hooded reptilians stood, smoke still drifting from the barrel of his weapon. James slowly lowered his arm, having instinctively shielded Catherine. A quick scan of the room confirmed that neither Tommy nor Catherine had been hit. The captive reptilian, however, wasn't so fortunate. The bullet had found its mark, the creature now motionless on the floor, its lifeblood seeping into the wooden planks. The room was a standstill, each faction evaluating their next move. The hooded reptilians, all 5 of them, spread out, effectively surrounding James, Catherine, and Tommy. The leader, gun still raised, hissed, "Your intervention is unnecessary." This world's fate was sealed long ago. Without hesitation, Tommy lunged towards the nearest window, smashing it open with his elbow. He shouted, "Run! We need to regroup." James and Catherine didn't need further encouragement. All 3 bolted in different directions, using the chaos and surprise of Tommy's move as a diversion. Shots rang out, the whizzing bullets just missing their marks. Catherine found herself sprinting through the dense forest, branches slapping her face and thorns pricking her arms. The distant sounds of pursuit confirmed her fears. They were being hunted. She took a quick detour, submerging herself in a stream, using the water to mask her scent. As she lay there, submerged up to her nose, she could hear the reptilians conversing in their hissing language. They sounded frustrated, their pursuit having been temporarily thwarted. When the coast seemed clear, Catherine emerged, water dripping from her clothes, the cold seeping into her bones. She remembered a nearby cave that could serve as a temporary hideout. She needed to regroup with James and Tommy. The cave, hidden behind a cascade of ivy and moss, was as she remembered it. A small fire pit from previous visitors indicated it was sometimes used as a refuge by hikers. She quickly lit a fire, the flame's warmth a comforting reprieve. She didn't have to wait long. Soon, she heard familiar voices calling her name. James and Tommy appeared, both looking equally worse for wear. A collective sigh of relief filled the cave. James began, "We need a plan. We're outgunned, and it's clear these reptilians aren't here for peaceful negotiations." Tommy interjected, "They are after the water. That much is clear. It's their conduit for energy, but they've also poisoned it to harm us." Catherine, shivering from her watery escape, added, "We need to expose their plan to the world." "But how?" James looked thoughtful. "We need evidence, something irrefutable. But first, we need more information. That reptilian we captured, it mentioned a balance and a rift among their kind. There might be others who oppose this invasion." As the 3 brainstormed, a soft whisper echoed through the cave. It was a voice, soft yet urgent, "Do not despair, humans." They turned to find a figure standing at the mouth of the cave, its tall frame obscured by the shadows. As it stepped into the light, its reptilian features were unmistakable. However, unlike the aggressive ones they'd encountered, this one's demeanor was calm, almost serene. James, always the skeptic, demanded, "Who are you?" The reptilian bowed its head slightly, "I am Saris. I oppose the faction that seeks to dominate your world." Tommy, still on edge, questioned, "Why should we trust you?" Saris replied, "The reptilian you captured was my kin. He sought to warn you, to help you. Our kind is not monolithic. There are those, like me, who wish for a peaceful coexistence. Catherine, ever the diplomat, inquired, "What can you tell us about their plans?" Saris hesitated, then spoke, "The water is crucial. On Earth Day, they plan to activate a device in every major water facility. Once activated, it will render your water not just toxic, but also enhance its energetic properties, ensuring our kind's dominance." James clenched his fists. "We need to stop them." "But how?" Saris looked grave. "The devices are heavily guarded. But there is a central hub, a master control of sorts. Disrupt that, and the entire plan crumbles." Tommy nodded. "Then that's where we need to go. We need to destroy that hub." Saris cautioned, "It won't be easy. The hub is located deep within their stronghold. You'll need a guide." James looked at Saris, his eyes searching for any hint of deceit. But there was an earnestness in Saris' gaze that seemed genuine. "Will you be our guide, Saris?" James asked, his voice still cautious. Saris nodded solemnly. "I will. I want this madness to end as much as you do." And so, an unlikely alliance was forged in the depths of that cave. Saris would lead them to the heart of the Reptilian stronghold, where they would face unimaginable dangers and confront the sinister plot that threatened not just their world but the balance of power in the universe. As they prepared to embark on this perilous journey, the whispers in the water seemed to grow louder, echoing the urgency of their mission. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, and the next chapter of their harrowing adventure awaited. Chapter 7. The stronghold's shadow dusk fell quickly, wrapping the world in an inky cloak. The moonlight offered scant illumination, but it was enough for the team as they began their treacherous journey. Led by Saris, James, Tommy, and Catherine ventured deeper into unknown territory, away from the familiar landmarks of their homeland. The path they treaded was not one of convenience but of secrecy. Saris explained that the woods were riddled with reptilian patrols, their sensors keen and technology advanced. A main road or an overtly trampled path would draw unwanted attention. As they trudged through thorny bushes and muddy trails, the air grew colder, denser, and the ambiance more eerie. Catherine could feel the weight of the dark forest pressing on her. It felt as if they were being watched, every rustle of leaves making her heart race. James pulled out an old ham radio he'd managed to salvage. He'd modded it himself, hoping to catch reptilian communication. The static hissed, breaking occasionally to let through incomprehensible snippets of conversation. It was frustrating, but James was patient. Every little sound gave him more insight into their enemy's plans. Hours seemed like days, and as they ventured further, the forest opened up to a vast clearing. It was a scene straight out of a dystopian novel. Towering walls of reinforced metal stood before them, reflecting the pale moonlight. Guard towers dotted its length, with occasional patrols. This was the Reptilian stronghold. James whispered, "How do we get in there?" Tommy looked at Saris. "Is there a secret passage or an unguarded entrance?" Saris nodded slowly. "There's an underground waterway. They use it to transport resources. It's not heavily guarded because of its environmental hazards. But for us, it might be our only way in." Catherine questioned, "Environmental hazards?" Saris's eyes darkened. "The waters are infested with creatures, bioengineered for defense. But I believe with the right distraction, we can make our way through." James immediately started thinking. "We need a plan. A diversion." Tommy, looking at the ham radio, got an idea. "What if we hijack their communications? Send them on a wild goose chase while we infiltrate the base." Saris seemed impressed. "That could work. But their communication system is encrypted. You'd need to be close." James smirked. "Leave that to me." Setting up a makeshift camp in the woods, they spent hours working on the radio. Tommy, with his tech expertise, combined with James's knowledge from the intercepted communications, began crafting a believable distress call. The message was simple: a report of human insurgents at the eastern perimeter, far from their intended entry point. Once ready, James, with the radio in tow, moved as close to the stronghold as he dared, activating the distress signal. Within minutes, they could hear the commotion. Reptilian guards scrambled towards the eastern side, their numbers visibly thinning on the walls. Now was their chance. Saris led them to the entrance of the waterway. A grate barred their entry, but it was no match for Tommy's toolkit. They slipped inside, the cold water coming up to their waists. The current was strong, and they had to hold onto each other to avoid being swept away. Navigating through the waterway was harrowing. The darkness was almost complete, with only the occasional shaft of moonlight providing any semblance of vision. And then there were the creatures. Every so often, a shadow would dart past, or they'd feel something brush against their legs. Suddenly, Catherine screamed. Something had her leg, pulling her under. James and Tommy tried to help, but the force was too strong. Saris acted quickly, his reptilian eyes piercing the darkness. With a swift movement, he stabbed the water, a muffled shriek echoing. Catherine emerged, gasping for breath, a deep gash on her calf. "We need to move, and fast," Tommy urged. Emerging from the waterway, they found themselves in the underbelly of the stronghold. Massive chambers filled with technology they'd never seen, and tunnels leading in all directions. It was a labyrinth. Catherine, despite her injury, stood strong. "We need to find the central hub. Disable it." James nodded, "And we need to do it quickly. Our diversion won't hold them for long." As they ventured deeper into the stronghold, the real magnitude of the reptilian operation dawned upon them. This wasn't just a base, it was a city. And the thought of its inhabitants returning sent shivers down their spines. The clock was ticking, and every corridor, every room, held a new danger. But their determination was unyielding. They had come too far and lost too much to be stopped now. And somewhere in the depths of the reptilian stronghold, the central hub awaited, the key to stopping in Chapter 8. Heart of the Nexus, the echo of their footsteps seemed amplified in the vast, cold corridors of the stronghold. The alien architecture was both mesmerizing and menacing. Bioluminescent veins ran along the walls, pulsating in rhythm like a monstrous heartbeat. Tommy kept glancing at Catherine's leg. The gash was deep, and although she showed no sign of pain, her pale face betrayed her. "We need to find somewhere to tend to that wound," Tommy whispered. Catherine gave a weak smile. "Let's find the hub first." Saris's eyes flickered with an inner light as he tried to recall the stronghold's layout. "The central hub will be heavily guarded, and we need to find its exact location. We must be cautious." James held onto the radio, occasionally scanning frequencies for any hint of their discovery. "This place is a maze," he muttered. A haunting melody, like a siren song, echoed through the halls, making the hair on the back of their necks stand up. It was eerily beautiful, and as they followed its source, they came upon a vast chamber. The heart of the stronghold. The room was dominated by a massive structure that reached up to the ceiling, a nexus of intertwining cables, terminals, and nodes. The central hub. Around it, reptilian technicians worked diligently, their fingers moving with lightning speed over the controls. And at the very center of the hub, suspended in a column of shimmering light, was a crystal pulsating with an ethereal glow. "That's the energy source," Saris whispered. "If we disable that crystal, the entire network falls apart." James studied the room. "We need a diversion. Something big." Catherine, her eyes scanning the chamber, pointed to a series of tanks lining the far wall. They were filled with a viscous, glowing liquid. "What are those?" Saris looked grim. "Energy reserves. Highly volatile." Tommy grinned. "Sounds like our diversion." Forming a quick plan, Tommy and James would create a controlled explosion near the tanks, drawing the guards' attention, allowing Catherine and Saris to get to the crystal. Taking a deep breath, they moved into position. Tommy and James, using tools and some stolen tech, began to tamper with the tank's release valves. The hissing sound of escaping gas filled the air, masked by the room's haunting melody. Suddenly, alarms blared, red warning lights flashing. The Reptilian technicians turned their attention to the leaking tanks, panic evident in their eyes. That's when the explosion hit. The blast was deafening, shaking the entire chamber. Fire and smoke filled the room, chaos reigned. Using the confusion, Catherine and Saris dashed to the central hub. Catherine, her fingers deft, began to disable the security protocols while Saris provided cover, fending off any approaching guards. As Catherine worked, she could feel the power of the crystal. It wasn't just a source of energy, it was alive. A consciousness trapped, crying out in pain. This isn't just a power source, Saris. It's a being. Saris nodded gravely. A sacrifice for the greater good. We must free it. As the last security lock was disengaged, Catherine reached out, her hand making contact with the crystal. A rush of memories, emotions, and images flooded her mind. A once thriving civilization, destroyed by the Reptilians, their essence trapped in the crystal, used as a power source. A cry for freedom echoed in her mind. With newfound determination, Catherine channeled her energy, connecting with the crystal's consciousness. The room vibrated with power as the crystal began to glow brighter, its energy surging. Around them, the stronghold began to shake, the walls cracking, alarms sounding. The Reptilian guards, sensing the danger, began to retreat. James and Tommy rushed to Catherine's side, pulling her away from the now unstable hub. The four of them sprinted towards the exit as the stronghold collapsed around them. Debris, smoke, and fire blocked their path, but they pressed on, driven by the desire to survive. Emerging into the night, they watched as the stronghold crumbled, a plume of smoke rising into the sky. The once imposing structure was now a smoldering ruin. Exhausted, battered, but alive, the group looked at each other. The immediate threat was over, but the battle was just beginning. Saris spoke, his voice filled with emotion. Today, we struck a blow against the invaders. But this is just the start. Together, humans and reptilians can coexist peacefully. We must work towards that future. James nodded, clasping Saris's hand. Together, we'll ensure a future for both our species. As dawn broke, casting the first rays of light on the decimated stronghold, hope bloomed in their hearts. The fight had just begun, but with unity and determination, they would prevail. Chapter 9. Whispers from the deep. The eerie darkness of the New York underground was an enigma, filled with the unknown and soaked in centuries-old secrets. James, Catherine, Tommy, and Saris found themselves in a vast underground aqueduct system, the city's old waterworks network that had long been forgotten. You think they've infiltrated this too? Tommy whispered, his flashlight beam cutting through the inky blackness, revealing ancient brick walls encrusted with centuries of mold and algae. Saris responded, water is life. If they control it, they control us. There was a chilly feel to the air, a dampness that seeped into their bones. But it wasn't just the cold that sent shivers down their spines. The silence was unnerving, so complete, so total, it felt like the weight of the entire city pressed down on them. Every drop of water that echoed in the distance, every faint rustling sound, made Catherine's heart race. We should have brought reinforcements, she whispered, regret in her voice. James gripped her hand reassuringly. We need to figure out what we're up against first. They made their way deeper into the underground system. The pathways branched off in numerous directions. Their only guide was a series of old maps that James had managed to procure from a city archive. Suddenly, Catherine halted, her eyes narrowing. Do you hear that? A soft, haunting melody wafted through the tunnels, echoing off the wet stone walls. It was melancholic and filled with sorrow, a song of despair. Following the sound, they entered a massive underground chamber. In the center was a vast pool of crystal-clear water, shimmering under the faint light that filtered from the cracks above. Surrounding the pool were hooded figures, their faces obscured, chanting in a language none of them recognized. Saris gasped, "It's the lament of the depths." An ancient reptilian mourning song. But why here? Tommy, always the brave one, stepped forward. "Hey!" he shouted. The hooded figure stopped, turning to face the intruders. Slowly, they pulled back their hoods, revealing not the scaled faces of the reptilians but the hollow eyes and gaunt features of humans, men, women, and even children, all with a haunted, vacant expression. One of the figures, an elderly man with a long, white beard, stepped forward. "You shouldn't be here," he rasped. James responded, "We're here to help." "The reptilians, are they controlling this place?" The old man nodded. "They have enslaved us, forced us to maintain these waterworks. But it's not just physical labor. They're draining us, feeding off our life force." Saris looked horrified. "The lament. You sing it for yourselves?" The man nodded again, tears streaming down his face. "For us, for our lost ones, for the world above that has forgotten us." Catherine, compassion in her eyes, approached the man. "We want to help. Tell us what to do." The man pointed to a massive, ornate door on the far end of the chamber. "Behind that door lies the heart of their operation. But it's guarded by things far more terrifying than the reptilians. Monstrosities that they have created." Tommy tightened his grip on his weapon. "We'll handle it. Right, James?" James nodded, determination in his eyes. Together, the group approached the door cautiously. The haunting melody of the lament continued behind them, a chilling backdrop to their mission. With a deep breath, they pushed open the door. The room beyond was bathed in a sickly green light. At its center stood a monstrous contraption, a combination of machinery and living tissue, tubes and wires snaking out in every direction. Around it, reptilian guards patrolled, their eyes glowing an eerie yellow. But what truly horrified them were the tanks that lined the walls. Inside, suspended in a thick, greenish fluid, were humans in various stages of transformation, some with scales beginning to form on their skin, others with elongated reptilian tails, and some with eyes that had morphed into vertical slits. James's voice was filled with horror. "They're turning them into reptilians." Tommy looked sickened. "We have to shut this down. Now." The group sprang into action. Using the element of surprise, they quickly took down the guards. Catherine and Saris began working on the machine, trying to decipher its complex workings. As they worked, the liquid in the tanks began to bubble and churn. The bodies inside started to convulse, their transformation accelerating at a terrifying rate. "We need to hurry," Tommy yelled, firing at the tanks, trying to break the glass. Suddenly, the ground shook. From the shadows emerged a creature, a grotesque hybrid of human and reptilian. Its eyes glowed with malevolence, and its scaly skin glistened with a sickly sheen. With a guttural growl, it lunged at them. A frantic battle ensued. The creature was relentless, shrugging off bullets and striking with blinding speed. Catherine, with her quick thinking, managed to create an improvised explosive device using materials from the room. With a deafening explosion, the creature was thrown back, smoke and debris filling the chamber. Seizing the opportunity, Saris and Catherine raced to disable the monstrous contraption. With deft movements, they disconnected cables and severed vital connections. The room's sickly green glow flickered and died. Outside, the transformation tanks went silent. The once convulsing bodies inside now floated lifelessly in the green fluid. Tommy, panting and battered, helped James to his feet. "We did it," he gasped, relief washing over him. But their victory was short-lived. The ground trembled again, this time more violently. Cracks spider webbed across the chamber floor as water began to seep in, gushing from unseen breaches in the underground walls. Saris shouted over the rising tumult, "The underground is collapsing. We need to leave, now." With water rising rapidly, they fled the chamber, sprinting through the labyrinthine tunnels. The haunting melody of the lament still echoed, now an urgent dirge. As they ascended toward the surface, The waterworks' ancient foundations groaned under the strain of the cataclysm below. The world above seemed like a distant dream, a sanctuary they yearned to return to. Emerging into the city streets, they were met with chaos. The underground collapse had caused massive sinkholes and ruptured water mains. The city was flooding, and panic rippled through the population. Saris looked at James, his reptilian eyes filled with gratitude. "You saved us all." But James knew the battle was far from over. "We stopped one part of their plan, but the Reptilians are still out there. We need to expose their larger agenda." Catherine, soaking wet and determined, added, "The world needs to know what's happening beneath their feet." Tommy scanned the devastation around them. "And we'll make sure they do. We have evidence, Saris's testimony, and a city that can no longer deny the truth." With their mission far from complete, the group forged ahead. The reptilian threat remained, lurking in the shadows, their motives and ultimate plan still a mystery. The world was on the brink of a revelation that would shatter illusions and reveal the horrifying truth that had remained hidden for millennia. And as the floodwaters receded, revealing the city's scars, they knew that the battle against the reptilian invasion was far from over. Chapter 10. The monstrosity's dance. The creature loomed over the group, a chilling combination of both human and reptilian features. Its once human eyes were now an eerie shade of gold with vertical slits for pupils. With each step, its massive, clawed feet sent tremors through the chamber. Its once human mouth was now stretched into a grotesque grin, revealing sharp, carnivorous teeth dripping with saliva. Catherine, face pale with terror, whispered, "What have they done?" James, although equally horrified, kept his composure. "We need a plan. Now." The creature lunged at Tommy, who barely dodged its razor-sharp talons. Saris, with her knowledge of reptilian lore, began chanting in their ancient tongue, trying to command or, at least, distract the creature. The chamber echoed with the monstrous creature's roars and the screams of the partially transformed humans in the tanks. The machine in the middle continued to hum and whir, and its tubes pulsated with a sickly green fluid, pumping the transformation agent into the tanks. "James, Tommy, keep it distracted," Saris shouted. "Catherine and I will work on the machine. If we can stop the process, maybe, just maybe, we can reverse it." Tommy, with agility that surprised even himself, led the creature on a harrowing chase around the chamber, firing shots whenever he could. The creature was fast, its hybrid state giving it a disturbing agility. Tommy could feel its breath on his neck, the heat from its enraged roars warming the back of his head. James joined in, using a sharp piece of metal he'd found on the ground as a makeshift weapon, trying to find any weakness in the creature's defense. But it was like fighting a force of nature, raw, relentless, and unyielding. Meanwhile, Catherine and Saris frantically worked on the machine. They tried to decode the controls, looking for a shutdown or a reverse switch. Every second counted, as the humans in the tanks were undergoing rapid and grotesque transformations. The chamber was filled with the horrific sight of humans writhing and contorting, their screams of pain muffled by the liquid. "We need to cut the main power source," Catherine shouted over the cacophony. But where was it? The machine's design was alien, its workings inscrutable. Amidst the chaos, Saris spotted a set of glyphs etched onto a panel, reptilian runes. "Catherine, I think I've found something." She began to recite the symbols, translating them as quickly as she could. As Tommy and James continued their desperate battle against the creature, a chance blow from Tommy caused it to stumble back into one of the tanks. The glass shattered, releasing the greenish fluid and the half-transformed occupant. The creature, now dazed, got entangled with the struggling human-reptilian hybrid, buying the team a few precious moments. Using the translations Saris provided, Catherine managed to locate the machine's central control hub. With trepidation, she pressed a sequence of buttons, and the chamber was filled with a blinding light. As the light dimmed, the machine powered down, the humming and whirring ceasing. The tubes stopped pulsating, and the tank's occupants, no longer being pumped with the transforming agent, began to calm down, their transformations halting midway. The monstrous creature, weakened and disoriented, let out a mournful cry and collapsed to the ground, reverting slowly to its original human form. James, Tommy, Catherine, and Saris gathered, catching their breaths, taking in the scene of destruction and the halted horrors around them. "We did it," Tommy panted, relief evident in his voice. Saris, her eyes filled with tears, whispered, "But at what cost?" Catherine, looking at the half-transformed humans in the tanks, murmured, "We need to find a way to help them, to reverse this." James nodded, determination in his eyes. "We've halted the Reptilians' plans for now, but this is far from over. We need to find a cure for these poor souls, and ensure that such horrors are never unleashed again." The team left the chamber, but the haunting sights and sounds of that underground nightmare would remain etched in their memories forever. They had witnessed the depths of the Reptilians' malevolence and knew that the battle for humanity's soul was far from over. Chapter 11. The water's whispers. The city streets above seemed calm and pristine as James and the group emerged from the underground chamber. But the peace was an illusion. Each of them bore the weight of knowledge that horrors lurked just beneath the surface, waiting for their opportunity to rise. James, although burdened by the recent events, felt an urgency that couldn't be ignored. Water. The very essence of life was now in danger. If the Reptilians seized control of the waterworks across America, the entire country would be on its knees in a matter of days. "We need to split up," James proposed. "Catherine, you and Saris should try to find a cure for the half-transformed victims. Tommy and I will look into the waterworks." Catherine nodded, her eyes grim. "If they've tampered with our water, the scale of transformation could be unimaginable. Millions could be affected." As Catherine and Saris left for the city's main research lab, Tommy pulled James aside. "Look," Tommy said hesitantly, "I found this on one of the guards back there." He held out a metal badge, emblazoned with an emblem that combined both reptilian symbols and the logo of the city's waterworks. A chill ran down James's spine. "They're already inside," he whispered. Rushing to the city's central waterworks, they found themselves outside a massive structure that loomed like a sentinel. But as they approached, they noted something unusual. Guards stationed at every entry point, their movements too rigid, their expressions void of any humanity. James and Tommy exchanged a glance. "We're not getting in through the front," Tommy murmured. Making their way around the perimeter, they spotted a drainage pipe. With no other choice, they decided to make their entry through it. The path was narrow, wet, and filled with the echoes of dripping water. The further they went, the more they could hear whispered voices, the voices of water. At first, it seemed like a mere product of their tense imaginations. Still, as they listened intently, they discerned clear messages, warnings, laments, and cries for help. The water, it seemed, was alive and conscious. And it was suffering. Emerging from the drainage, they found themselves in a massive control room. Large tanks filled with water lined the room, connected to a vast network of pipes. At the center stood a huge console with numerous buttons and levers, surrounded by men and women, employees of the waterworks, but their vacant eyes and stiff postures made it evident they were under reptilian influence. Tommy nudged James, pointing to a tall figure overseeing the operations, Commander Lysak, one of the high-ranking officers in the reptilian hierarchy. Lysak, with his green-scaled skin and piercing yellow eyes, looked around the room, ensuring all was going as planned. Beside him was a device, similar to the one in the underground chamber, but smaller. A green liquid pulsed within, and tubes ran from it to each of the water tanks. "They're introducing the transformation agent into the water supply," Tommy whispered, horror evident in his voice. James nodded. "We need to stop it. And free those people. But how?" The room was filled with mind-controlled employees, and confronting Lysak head-on would be suicide. Recalling Saris's chant from the underground chamber, James whispered it into Tommy's ear. It distracted the creature. Maybe it will break the mind control. Without a better plan, they began chanting. At first, nothing happened. Then, one by one, the employees started clutching their heads, groaning in pain. The reptilian influence began to wane. Lysak, realizing something was amiss, turned to locate the source of the chant. His eyes locked onto James and Tommy. A guttural growl emanated from his throat as he advanced towards them. But the chant had done its job. The employees, now freed from reptilian control, began to retaliate. Chaos erupted in the control room. Using the ensuing confusion, James and Tommy made their way to the central console. They needed to shut down the system and stop the flow of the transformative agent into the water. As Tommy worked on the controls, James confronted Lysak. The two clashed fiercely. James, relying on his human agility and desperation, against Lysak's brute strength and reptilian reflexes. After a fierce struggle, Tommy managed to reverse the flow, drawing the agent out of the water and back into the device. The waterworks alarms blared, signaling an emergency shutdown. Lysak, seeing his plans thwarted, let out a roar of rage. But before he could react, a group of freed employees tackled him, subduing him. Breathing heavily, James and Tommy looked around. The immediate danger was over, but the damage was already done. Some of the water, tainted with the transformation agent, had already been distributed. As they left the waterworks, the weight of their next mission was evident. They had to warn the citizens and find a way to cleanse the affected water. The city's fate, and perhaps that of the entire nation, hung in the balance. Chapter 12. The echoes of the past, the gray hue of dawn, broke over the city, painting the skyline with a soft glow. But the serenity was a stark contrast to the urgency that gripped James and Tommy as they navigated the maze-like streets, heading toward the town hall. Every tap, every fountain, every drop of water in the city could be tainted, and the clock was ticking. Upon reaching the hall, they were met with scenes of chaos. People bustled about, some filling containers with water, others in animated discussions. A banner overhead read, "Emergency water distribution." "Seems like word got around faster than we thought," Tommy remarked, watching a mother carefully fill a bottle for her child. Yet, something felt off. James observed the townsfolk. Their eyes betrayed not the anxiety of a city under siege but rather a different kind of terror, reminiscent, fearful. The water crisis had stirred something more profound, an old ghost from the city's past. Before they could inquire further, Mayor Larson, a tall, robust man with graying hair, approached them. Recognizing James from previous encounters, he beckoned them to his makeshift office, a corner of the town hall with a simple desk and chair. "James, Tommy," he greeted, though his face was lined with worry. "I've heard about the waterworks incident. The city owes you. But there's more. The people are scared, not just of the reptilian threat but something older." James leaned forward, intrigued. "What do you mean?" The mayor hesitated, glancing around as if fearing eavesdroppers. "Legends, tales passed down through generations, speak of an ancient spirit that once inhabited our water sources, a guardian of sorts. It was said that when the city faced its darkest times, this spirit would emerge to protect its people." Tommy raised an eyebrow. "Sounds like a fairy tale." Mayor Larson nodded. "Many thought so, until the Great Drought decades ago. With water sources drying up, people reported seeing a spectral figure near wells and rivers, and soon after, water miraculously began to return." James considered this. "So, you think this guardian spirit might help us against the reptilians?" The mayor sighed. "I don't know. But with the water now tainted and the city on edge, some believe the guardian may return. The problem is, not all tales about the spirit are benevolent. Some say it can be vengeful if the waters it protects are harmed." The weight of the situation pressed on James. "We need to find out more. Perhaps there's a way to summon or communicate with this spirit." Larson nodded. "There's an old seer, Agatha, living on the outskirts of town. People say she's over a century old and has seen the Guardian herself. She might be our best bet. Armed with this new lead, James and Tommy left the town hall and made their way to Agatha's residence, an old wooden cottage, nestled amidst a grove of ancient trees. The air grew colder as they approached, and the soft whisper of wind seemed to carry echoes of ancient chants. Knocking gently on the door, it was soon opened by a frail, old woman, her eyes sharp and piercing. "I've been expecting you," she said in a voice that seemed too strong for her age. Inside, the cottage was dimly lit, the walls lined with various talismans and artifacts. Agatha motioned for them to sit. The Guardian of the Waters is not to be trifled with. But desperate times call for desperate measures, she began. She explained that the Guardian could be summoned at the city's oldest well, using an ancient ritual. But they would need a relic, a silver chalice said to have been used in past summonings. Tommy, ever the skeptic, frowned. "And where do we find this chalice?" Agatha smiled mysteriously. "It was lost years ago, but legends say it lies in the catacombs beneath the city's cathedral." The idea of diving into a labyrinth of catacombs was daunting, but time was of the essence. With Agatha's guidance and a map she provided, the duo set forth. The catacombs were dark and foreboding, a maze of corridors echoing with the whispers of the past. But with every twist and turn, James felt they were drawing closer to their goal. Hours seemed to pass before they stumbled upon an old chamber, in the center of which stood a pedestal, the silver chalice resting atop it, untouched by time. But as James reached out to grab it, the ground trembled. From the shadows emerged ghostly apparitions, guardians of the chalice, demanding to know their intent. With conviction, James explained their mission, pleading for their aid. After what felt like an eternity, the spirits relented, vanishing and leaving the chalice for the taking. With the relic in hand, they returned to Agatha, preparing for the summoning chapter 13. The waters stir the night was enveloped in an impenetrable inky blackness, save for the occasional silvery ray of moonlight that peeked through the clouds. The city's oldest well, once a beacon of life, now stood decrepit, surrounded by overgrown foliage and long-forgotten memories. James, Tommy, and Agatha, guided only by a lantern's flickering flame, reached the well's edge. A sense of foreboding settled in the pit of James's stomach, but determination quelled his rising fear. Agatha, her face etched with wrinkles of wisdom and age, began outlining a wide circle around the well using a mixture of salt and crushed herbs. She muttered incantations under her breath, her voice rising and falling in rhythm with the gusty winds. Tommy, despite his skepticism, could feel the atmosphere change, becoming charged with an eerie energy. "Whatever you're doing, Agatha, it's working," he whispered. She nodded, her eyes fixed on the task. "The spirits of water are sensitive. We must be respectful, yet direct in our intentions." Once the circle was complete, Agatha handed the ancient silver chalice to James. "Fill it with water from the well," she instructed. James hesitated for a moment, hearing whispers of caution in his mind, but with a steadying breath, he leaned over and scooped the cool, clear water into the chalice. As he pulled back, a reflection not of his own stared back from the water's surface, a pale, ghostly face with piercing blue eyes. He stumbled backward, nearly spilling the contents. Tommy rushed to his side. "What did you see?" "A face. In the water," James replied, still shaken. Agatha looked intrigued but not surprised. "It has begun. The Guardian knows we are here." She took the chalice from James, setting it at the center of the circle. Closing her eyes, she began to sing, her voice clear and haunting, echoing through the still night. The water in the chalice began to shimmer, moving rhythmically as if responding to her song. The ground beneath them trembled. From the depths of the well, a vortex of water spiraled upward, forming into a towering, spectral figure. The Guardian of the Waters had been summoned. With a voice like the rush of a mighty river, it spoke, its gaze fixated on the trio. "Why have you called upon me?" James, finding his voice, replied, "The city's waters are threatened." We seek your protection, your guidance." The Guardian studied James, its watery eyes probing deep into his soul. "The Reptilians, they bring darkness. But why should I intervene? Mankind has polluted and wasted my precious gift for centuries." James felt the weight of the Guardian's words but replied with conviction, "It's true. We've erred in the past, but now, we're fighting not just for ourselves but for every life in this city, including the life of the waters themselves." A heavy silence hung in the air. Finally, the Guardian responded, "The Reptilians have hidden symbols of power throughout the city. These symbols tether their dark energy to the water. Find them, destroy them, and the waters will be freed." Tommy's pragmatic mind sprang into action. How will we recognize these symbols? And where should we start looking? The Guardian's form wavered, its figure splintering like rays of light through water. "The symbols bear the mark of the Reptilians' realm. Start at the heart of the city, where the waters converge." As the Guardian's form dissolved back into the well, a chilling scream echoed from the city's center, a scream not of terror, but of a sinister triumph. The Reptilians were making their move. Agatha, looking more weary than before, turned to James and Tommy. "The battle has begun. The symbols must be found and destroyed. Only then can the city be saved." The three of them, armed with purpose and the Guardian's guidance, ventured toward the city's heart, unaware of the challenges and horrors that awaited them. The night was far from over, and the Reptilians were not ones to surrender easily. Chapter 14. The heart of darkness, the heart of the city, was known as Confluence Point, where the three main rivers converged into one, feeding the vast expanse of the metropolis with life-sustaining water. On a regular day, the Confluence Point was a bustling hub, alive with the cacophony of merchants, laughter of children, and melodies of street musicians. But this night, it was eerily quiet, the silence occasionally broken by distant, sinister laughter. As James, Tommy, and Agatha approached, they could see the moonlight shimmering on the surface of the water. Yet, the sight was not one of beauty but of foreboding. The waters looked thicker, murkier, with a shade of greenish black, like a venomous serpent coiling around its prey. "Look!" Tommy pointed towards the main bridge spanning across the converging rivers. There, inscribed with luminescent ink, was a symbol, a twisted, serpent-like creature wrapped around a planet, its eyes glowing menacingly. "That's one of the Reptilian symbols," Agatha whispered, her face pale. James, recalling the Guardian's words, knew what they had to do. "We need to destroy it." "But how?" Agatha rummaged in her bag and produced a small crystal flask filled with a silvery liquid. "This is purified water from sacred springs, mixed with moonstone dust. It can cleanse dark energies. But we need to get closer." The trio cautiously made their way to the bridge, every step echoing their presence. The closer they got, the more overwhelming the energy of the symbol became. It was as if the symbol was alive, watching them, gauging them, challenging them. Suddenly, Tommy froze. "Do you hear that?" From the shadows emerged hooded figures, their faces obscured but eyes glowing a fierce reptilian green. They moved in a synchronized manner, encircling the trio, chanting in an ancient, guttural language. The air grew cold, and the very ground beneath them vibrated with dark energy. James clutched the flask from Agatha, his heart pounding. "We need a diversion." Tommy, ever the strategist, quickly picked up a rock and threw it towards the far end of the bridge. The sound echoed, diverting the attention of a few hooded figures. Seizing the moment, James dashed towards the symbol, but as he approached, an invisible force pushed him back. Agatha, her voice filled with urgency, shouted, "James! You have to believe that you can break through. Your willpower, your determination is the key." Gathering all his strength and determination, James focused on the symbol, channeling his energy and intent. He felt warmth radiating from his hand holding the flask, giving him the courage to move forward. With a defiant yell, he splashed the liquid onto the symbol. A blinding light erupted, and a deafening roar filled the air. The symbol started disintegrating, the serpent's glowing eyes fading into nothingness. The hooded figures, wailing in agony, retreated to the shadows from whence they came. The waters of the confluence point began to clear, the ominous greenish-black hue fading away. But James, Tommy, and Agatha knew that this was just the beginning. There were more symbols, more dark energies to confront. As dawn approached, casting the city in a soft golden hue, the trio regrouped. They had won a battle, but the war against the Reptilians was far from over. With renewed determination, they set forth, ready to face the horrors and challenges that lay ahead, united in their quest to protect their city and its life-giving waters. In the distance, atop a Gothic building, a silhouette watched them. It was clear that the Reptilians had underestimated these humans, but they wouldn't make the same mistake again. The true battle for the heart of the city was about to begin. Chapter 15. The labyrinth below beneath the city streets, a vast network of tunnels and ancient aqueducts spread like veins, pumping water to every corner. Unbeknownst to most, they were also home to forgotten civilizations, sacred artifacts, and remnants of ages long past. One such chamber deep within was called the Grotto of Whispers. Legend spoke of it as a place where the past and the present merged, where voices of ancient guardians whispered secrets to those who dared listen. If James, Tommy, and Agatha were to turn the tide in their battle against the Reptilians, they needed the knowledge guarded within this grotto. Navigating these tunnels was treacherous. Every turn seemed identical to the previous one, and maps from the city archives were outdated or incomplete. But Agatha had something else, an amulet, handed down in her family for generations, said to guide its bearer to the grotto. As they delved deeper, the trio felt the weight of the earth above pressing down. Moisture dripped from the walls, and an eerie quiet was broken only by their footsteps and distant, unidentifiable sounds. Was it the echo of water? Or whispers from the grotto? Tommy, usually composed, was visibly uneasy. Do you feel it? Like we're being watched? James nodded, his hand instinctively going to the blade hidden beneath his coat. Stay alert. We don't know what lurks in these tunnels. Suddenly, a chilling wind blew through the corridor, extinguishing their torches. In the pitch black, a soft voice began to chant in a language none recognized, growing louder with each second. Panicking, Agatha fumbled in her bag, retrieving a small crystal. With a whispered incantation, it lit up, casting an ethereal blue glow around them. By its light, they saw shadowy figures emerging from the walls, not reptilians, but spectral guardians of the grotto. Who dares enter the sacred depths? One of them intoned, its voice echoing. We seek knowledge to protect our city, James declared. The Reptilians threaten to corrupt our water and enslave the people. The guardians exchanged glances, then one stepped forward. Many have come before you with similar claims, only to misuse our secrets. Why should we trust you? Tommy, his voice firm, responded, We bear no malice. We only wish to protect our loved ones and ensure the survival of our city. The guardians seemed to converse without words, their translucent forms shimmering. Finally, they motioned the trio to follow. The walls of the grotto began to pulse with a soft light, illuminating intricate carvings of past battles between humans and otherworldly beings. In the heart of the grotto stood a pool of crystal-clear water. Whispers filled the air, growing louder as they approached. James could hear voices from ages past, recounting tales of bravery, treachery, and the eternal battle between light and darkness. One guardian gestured towards the pool. Gaze into the waters, and you may find the answers you seek. James stepped forward, peering into the depths. Visions swirled before him, reptilian rituals, hidden bases, and a dark figure orchestrating their moves. And then, he saw a symbol, one that could counteract the reptilian magic and perhaps even turn their own power against them. As the visions faded, Agatha whispered, the Ankh. The ancient symbol of life. We need to find it. The guardians nodded in agreement. Your path is clear, but be wary. The Reptilians are more cunning than you realize. They too know of this place and its secrets. Armed with newfound knowledge, the trio made their way back to the surface. But as they emerged, they found the city transformed. The reptilian influence was everywhere, in the air, the water, even the people. The battle for their city had truly begun. And in the shadows, the dark figure James had seen in his vision watched them, a sinister smile playing on its lips. The game was afoot. Chapter 16. Into the shadow's embrace, the sky over the city was tinged a deep shade of indigo, as if the heavens themselves were stained by the reptilian presence. Buildings that once stood proud and tall now seemed twisted, their facades contorted by unseen hands. People walked the streets, but they moved in a daze, their eyes vacant, souls clearly not their own. Agatha clutched the amulet tighter, as if its mere presence could ward off the pervasive malevolence that blanketed their home. The reptilians have moved quickly, she whispered, scanning the city from their hidden vantage point atop a dilapidated building. Tommy grimly nodded. It's like an infection, spreading from person to person. The water's been tainted, the very lifeblood of our city corrupted. James studied the layout below. We need the Ankh. It's our best shot at countering their magic. Any idea where we might find it? Agatha hesitated, her voice a mere breath. There's an old legend, one that speaks of a sacred chamber deep within the heart of the old cathedral. The Ankh is said to be hidden there, protected by ancient wards and traps. But finding it won't be easy. James frowned. The old cathedral? That's Reptilian Central right now. Are you sure about this? She nodded. It's the last place they'd expect us to look. Silence settled over them as they weighed their options. The journey would be fraught with danger, but with the Ankh, they had a fighting chance. After sundown, the trio made their way towards the old cathedral, sticking to the shadows. The once hallowed grounds now throbbed with a sickly green energy. James could hear faint chants, the language guttural and harsh, echoing through the night. Creeping closer, they could see the reptilian guards at the entrance, their scales shimmering in the dim light. Tommy motioned towards a side entrance, a forgotten old door hidden behind thick vines. Quietly, they slipped inside. The interior was a stark contrast to the pristine, sacred halls of memory. Statues of saints had been defaced, replaced by grotesque reptilian deities. But it was the central altar that drew their attention. A large pool of water, once pure, now bubbled with a dark, viscous liquid. Around it, hooded figures chanted, their voices melding into a hypnotic drone. James gestured for Agatha and Tommy to stay back while he crept closer, trying to make sense of the ritual. His heart raced as he recognized one of the hooded figures, Mayor Davidson, or at least, what remained of him. The man's eyes glowed a deep yellow, and his movements were jerky, controlled. Suddenly, the mayor raised his hands, and from the pool, a shadowy figure began to rise. It was neither human nor reptilian but something far more ancient and malevolent. The very air grew cold, and a palpable sense of dread settled over the cathedral. Agatha, sensing the dark energy, whispered an incantation, creating a protective barrier around them. But it wouldn't hold for long. They needed to find the Ankh and fast. Following Agatha's lead, they descended into the crypts below the cathedral. The air grew colder, the weight of centuries pressing down on them. But there was something else, a whisper that grew louder with each step. Voices from the past guiding them, warning them. After what felt like hours, they stumbled upon a chamber adorned with ancient symbols and carvings. In its center, bathed in a soft, ethereal light, was the Ankh. James reached out, but just as his fingers brushed the relic, the ground trembled, and walls began to close in. It was a trap. Tommy, thinking quickly, pulled a vial from his pocket, sprinkling its contents around them. The walls halted, but the chamber's entrance was now blocked by a massive stone door. As they pondered their escape, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. Agatha, eyes closed in concentration, began to chant, her voice echoing the whispers. The stone door trembled and then, with a groan, began to rise. But their relief was short-lived. Emerging from the shadows were the reptilian guards, their eyes fixed on the Ankh. James gripped the relic tighter, its energy pulsing through him. With a defiant shout, he unleashed a blast of pure, white energy, sending the guards reeling. The trio raced through the crypts, the Ankh's power shielding them. Emerging into the cathedral, they found chaos. The shadowy figure from the ritual was now fully formed, its dark tendrils reaching out, ensnaring all in its path. But James, with the Ankh's power, was a force to be reckoned with. The ensuing battle was epic, light against dark, hope against despair. In the end, the shadow was banished, but not without cost. The old cathedral lay in ruins, and the city, though free from the reptilians' immediate threat, bore scars that would take time to heal. As dawn broke, James, Agatha, and Tommy stood amidst the rubble, the Ankh's glow now a gentle hum. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. The reptilians would return, and they would be ready. Chapter 17. Whispers in the dark. The city's recovery was slow. Streets once teeming with life remained deserted, with silence punctuated only by the occasional mournful wind or the distant cries of those in grief. The reptilian threat had been pushed back, but not eradicated. The once glorious metropolis was now a city of shadows. In an underground chamber, James, Agatha, and Tommy gathered. Candles flickered, casting tall, wavering shadows that danced upon the stone walls. The Ankh, now a beacon of hope for the city, lay on a pedestal in the center. "We've won a battle," James began, "but the war looms large. The reptilians have tasted our city's energy, and they won't retreat for long. We need to be ready." Tommy, ever the pragmatist, chimed in, "We need more than just the three of us. The reptilians have an army. We need—" He paused, struggling to find the right word, "a resistance." Agatha, her eyes distant, as if peering into another realm, whispered, "The spirits of the city speak to me. There are those who have resisted the reptilian influence. They remain hidden, scared, but willing to fight." A plan began to form. They would seek out these pockets of resistance, unite them, and form a force formidable enough to take on the impending reptilian onslaught. But as days turned into nights and nights into days, the trio found that the task was not as straightforward. The reptilians had left behind sleeper agents, humans corrupted and controlled, their sole mission to thwart any form of uprising. The underground chambers became their sanctuary. Here, they would secretly meet with potential allies, always vigilant, always wary. One evening, as the trio pored over maps of the city, a soft knock echoed through the chamber. James cautiously approached the door, peering through a concealed peephole. A figure, hooded and cloaked, stood outside. There was something familiar about the posture, the slight tilt of the head. Opening the door, the hood was drawn back to reveal Clara, the city's chief librarian and a long-lost friend of Agatha. Tears welled up in Agatha's eyes as they embraced, the weight of days of fear and uncertainty momentarily lifted. "They took my library," Clara whispered, her voice tinged with anger and despair. "Turned it into a den for their dark rituals. But I found something that could be of use." From within her cloak, she produced a book, ancient and bound in leather. Its title was written in a script that seemed to move, to shift, lore of shadows and light. "This," Clara explained, "contains rituals, counterspells, and defenses against dark forces. I believe it might have a way to cleanse the city's waters, to rid it of the reptilian taint." Hours turned into days as they studied the tome, deciphering its secrets. They learned of the existence of a crystal, the tear of Luna, said to purify anything it touched. Legend held that it lay in the Caves of Desolation, a treacherous labyrinth on the city's outskirts. The mission was clear. They needed to retrieve the tear of Luna. With the Ankh as their guide and the book as their reference, the team, now strengthened with Clara's wisdom, set out. The journey to the caves was fraught with danger. Sleeper agents lurked in the shadows, striking when least expected. Creatures, twisted by the reptilians' dark magic, prowled the land. But with each challenge they faced, the group's resolve only grew stronger. The Caves of Desolation lived up to their name. Dark and foreboding, they seemed to swallow light itself. The air was thick, heavy with the weight of unspoken fears. But guided by the Ankh and armed with the knowledge from Clara's tome, they pressed on. Deep within the cave's heart, they stumbled upon a crystal-clear pool. Floating in its center was the tear of Luna, its facets reflecting the scant light, creating a mesmerizing dance of shadows and luminescence. As James reached out to claim it, a voice echoed through the cavern. Cold, mocking, and all too familiar, it was the shadowy figure from the cathedral. "You think this trinket can save your city?" it hissed. "You are but ants, and this is merely the beginning." From the shadows, reptilian soldiers emerged, their eyes fixed on the intruders. A fierce battle ensued. The cavern's walls echoed with the sounds of clashing metal, incantations, and the raw power of the Ankh. The tear of Luna, sensing the impending threat, began to glow brighter, its light pushing back the encroaching darkness. With a final, concerted effort, James, wielding the Ankh, and Agatha, channeling the power of the tear, unleashed a wave of pure energy. The shadowy figure screamed in rage and pain, dissipating into nothingness, its minions retreating with it. The cave, once a place of dread, now shimmered in the soft glow of the tear of Luna. Exhausted but victorious, the group made their way back to the city. With the tear's power, they began the painstaking process of cleansing the city's water, healing its Chapter 18. Beneath veiled waters, the city felt different. Though the tear of Luna shimmered brightly, casting its purifying glow upon the once tainted waters, an unsettling quietude permeated the streets. Residents, though no longer under the oppressive thumb of the Reptilians, moved as if in a daze, their memories of the occupation still fresh and raw. It was in this uneasy calm that James, Agatha, Clara, and Tommy convened in a refurbished town hall, discussing the path forward. "The tear of Luna has done its job," Clara remarked, her fingers tracing the rim of an ornate chalice filled with the now crystal-clear water. "Yet the reptilian threat remains. Their king and their citadel are still out there." Agatha's gaze was distant, her connection with the spirits providing glimpses into other realms. "They plan a counteroffensive. I sense it. They'll come for the tear, and they'll come with numbers we haven't seen." It was Tommy who posed the pivotal question. "Where? When? We need specifics." But before an answer could materialize, a messenger burst into the hall, breathless and wide-eyed. "The cathedral. It's alive." Confusion rippled through the room. "What do you mean, alive?" James demanded. The messenger gulped, struggling to find words. "The walls, they're breathing. And there's a voice, a whisper coming from beneath." The quartet exchanged uneasy glances. The cathedral had been ground zero for the reptilian invasion and the nexus of their dark rituals. If it was showing signs of life, it could only mean one thing: the reptilians were making their move. Armed with the Ankh and guided by the tear's light, they ventured to the grand edifice. The cathedral, once a symbol of hope and unity, now stood as a twisted monument to the reptilians' dark reign. The stones seemed to pulse, contracting and expanding in a sickening rhythm. And from the ground, a soft, malicious whisper echoed, a chant in a tongue none recognized. Clara, drawing upon her vast knowledge, tried to decipher the words. "It's ancient, prehistoric, even. A summoning, calling forth something from the deep." The realization was chilling. If the reptilians had access to an ancient entity, their power would be unparalleled. Time was of the essence. Venturing into the cathedral's depths, they were led to the crypts, where the whisper grew louder, more insistent. The very air was thick with malevolence. In the crypt's center stood a well, long sealed and forgotten. The whisper emanated from its dark maw. Agatha, connecting with the spirits, sought guidance. "This well is a conduit to another realm, a place of darkness and despair. The reptilians seek to unleash its denizens upon our world." James, determination evident in his eyes, declared, "Then we seal it. For good." But as they approached the well, they realized it wouldn't be that simple. Shadows, long and twisted, emerged, reaching for them with a hunger that was palpable. Each shadow was an echo of a soul lost to the reptilians' dark magic, yearning for release but bound to their will. A fierce battle ensued. The Ankh, wielded by James, became a beacon of light, cutting through the dark tendrils. Clara chanted incantations from her tome, creating barriers and shields. Tommy, ever the fighter, engaged the shadows hand to hand, his every strike infused with the power of the tear of Luna. And Agatha, her spirit connections at their peak, summoned ethereal allies, countering shadow with light. Yet, with every shadow they felled, two more took its place. The well's pull grew stronger, its whisper turning into a deafening roar. In a moment of desperation, Agatha cried out, "The tear. Use it to seal the well." Without hesitation, James approached the well, the tear of Luna in one hand and the Ankh in the other. As he neared, the well's pull intensified, threatening to drag him into its abyss. Mustering all his strength, James thrust the tear into the well's heart. A blinding light erupted, a force so powerful it pushed everyone back. The shadow screamed in agony, dissipating into nothingness. The cathedral shook, stones and debris falling all around. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. The well, once a portal to darkness, now lay dormant, sealed by the tear's purifying light. Exhausted but triumphant, the group emerged from the cathedral, greeted by the sight of a city reborn. The sky, once overcast, was now a brilliant hue of blue. Residents, sensing the change, came out of their homes, their faces reflecting hope and gratitude. Yet, amid the rejoicing, a lingering unease remained. The reptilian threat had not been fully eradicated, and the cryptic words of the whisper still haunted their thoughts. Chapter 19. Echoes of the Abyss. The victory over the cathedral and the sealing of the well brought a fragile peace to the city. The once polluted waters now sparkled, reflecting the cerulean sky. But James, Agatha, Clara, and Tommy knew that the reptilian threat had not been entirely extinguished. They gathered in the now cleared town hall, the tear of Luna resting on a pedestal at its center. Its purifying light still glowed, but dimmer than before. Agatha's connection with the spirits had grown quieter, their messages cryptic and unsettling. "They're not gone," Agatha began, her voice barely above a whisper. "The Reptilians. They're regrouping, gathering strength in the shadows." Tommy leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "How do we even fight them if we can't see them?" Clara spoke, her eyes fixed on the tear of Luna. "We must restore the tear's full power. It's the only way to unveil the hidden." With renewed determination, they set out on a quest to find the tear's lost fragments. Agatha had glimpsed their locations in her visions, scattered across the city in places both mundane and sinister. Their first destination was the city's archives, a labyrinthine maze of forgotten knowledge and ancient manuscripts. They sought the librarian's tear, a fragment believed to reveal hidden truths. It was rumored to be buried beneath the archives, guarded by traps and spectral sentinels. The journey into the subterranean depths of the archives was perilous. Ancient tomes lined the walls, some whispering forgotten incantations, others promising forbidden knowledge. As they ventured deeper, the darkness grew oppressive and their sense of time distorted. Finally, they reached a chamber adorned with cryptic symbols and guarded by specters of long-deceased scholars. Tommy, drawing upon the tear's light, engaged the apparitions, his combat skills proving as formidable as his magic. Clara, guided by her knowledge of ancient scripts, deciphered the symbols. A hidden passage revealed itself, leading to a chamber bathed in a gentle blue glow. In its center lay the librarian's tear, a sapphire pendant pulsing with ethereal energy. With the tear in their possession, they made their way to the second fragment's location, the abandoned subway tunnels beneath the city. Here, the tear of shadows awaited them, rumored to unveil hidden pathways. The tunnels were a labyrinth of darkness and echoes, filled with remnants of a bygone era. It was in this eerie underground realm that they encountered the remnants of the Reptilian cult, human survivors driven to madness by the Reptilians' dark magic. A harrowing battle ensued, with James wielding the Ankh to fend off the cultists' attacks. Agatha's spirit allies, empowered by the tear of Luna, provided a spectral shield, while Clara's incantations disrupted the cultists' corrupted rituals. Finally, they reached a chamber deep within the tunnels. An obsidian pedestal stood at its center, and upon it rested the tear of shadows, a dark gem emanating an unsettling aura. As James reached out to claim it, the gem emitted a haunting, melancholic melody. With two of the fragments now in their possession, they ventured forth to recover the tear of whispers from a place known as the Ruined Orphanage. It was said to unveil hidden secrets in the voices of the lost. The orphanage, dilapidated and forlorn, stood as a testament to past tragedies. Shadows clung to its crumbling walls, and echoes of children's laughter mingled with mournful whispers. The tear of whispers awaited them in the attic, guarded by a spectral guardian, a spectral embodiment of a lost child's longing. Agatha, connecting with the guardian's essence, learned of its tragic past, a past intertwined with the Reptilian invasion. In a heart-wrenching moment, they promised to put the guardian's soul to rest, and with their combined efforts, they succeeded. With the guardian's blessing, they claimed the tear of whispers, a shimmering opal that held the memories of the lost. As they left the orphanage, a chilling realization washed over them. The tears had shown them that the Reptilians' influence ran deeper than they had imagined. Their quest to restore the tear of Luna's full power had only just begun, and the city's darkest secrets awaited discovery. Chapter 20. Veil of Shadows. The three tears they had recovered pulsed with otherworldly energy, humming in harmony as if eager to reunite. James, Clara, Agatha, and Tommy returned to the town hall, their steps heavy with a growing sense of urgency. The tear of Luna, now brighter in response to the recovered fragments, hovered above the pedestal, casting a gentle azure glow across the chamber. Clara placed the tear of shadows beside it, its dark aura shimmering in contrast. Lastly, Agatha gently set the tear of whispers beside its counterparts. The moment the tears aligned, a tremor rippled through the room. Shadows danced on the walls, whispering secrets and prophecies. Agatha's eyes glowed with an ethereal light as she chanted incantations passed down through generations. As if in response to her incantations, the tears began to spin, faster and faster, forming a swirling vortex of energy. James felt an invisible force pulling at his very essence, drawing him closer to the mesmerizing spectacle. With a deafening crescendo, the vortex expanded, enveloping them. Time seemed to stand still as they found themselves in a realm beyond imagination. The surroundings were shrouded in perpetual twilight, and eerie echoes filled the air. Before them stood an enigmatic figure, clad in robes that seemed to meld with the very shadows around them. This was the Warden of Secrets, a guardian of the Tier's power. "You have come far, seekers of truth," the Warden intoned, its voice a haunting blend of wisdom and sorrow. "But the path ahead is treacherous." James stepped forward, his resolve unwavering. "We seek to unveil the Reptilians' hidden influence and stop their malevolent plans." The Warden's gaze bore into each of them, as if peering into their very souls. "To do so, you must embrace the full potential of the Tiers. But be warned, the power they bestow comes at a great cost." Without warning, the Tiers began to resonate with an intense brilliance, casting their light upon the group. Each Tier infused its bearer with its essence: Luna's purity, Shadow's obscurity, and Whisper's forgotten memories. In that moment, they experienced a surge of power beyond comprehension, yet it was accompanied by a profound transformation. James felt the weight of ancient knowledge flooding his mind, while Clara seemed to meld with the very shadows she commanded. Agatha's connection to the spirits became all-encompassing, and Tommy's affinity for magic reached new heights. With newfound abilities and a shared understanding of their mission, they returned to the city, their presence a beacon against the encroaching darkness. The Reptilians' influence, once concealed, was now exposed in the most sinister of ways. Their first target was the city's waterworks facility, where evidence hinted at a reptilian presence. Armed with their enhanced powers and unwavering determination, they infiltrated the facility's depths. Within the labyrinthine tunnels, they encountered reptilian agents guarding a sinister device designed to taint the city's water supply. The ensuing battle was fierce, the Tiers' power augmenting their every move. As they triumphed over the agents and disabled the device, they uncovered the shocking extent of the Reptilians' plan. The water supply had been contaminated with a mind-altering substance, ensuring the populace's continued manipulation. With the threat averted, they knew that their journey was far from over. The Reptilians had revealed themselves, and their true agenda was still shrouded in darkness. The Tiers had granted them extraordinary abilities, but they would need every ounce of strength to face the malevolent forces that lurked in the shadows. As they emerged from the waterworks facility, their eyes met the city's skyline, a looming testament to the battles yet to come. The battle against the Reptilian invasion had only just begun, and the city's fate hung in the balance. We hope you have enjoyed our Reptilian attack on national water resources as paranormal scary story. Please visit us at Paranormal Untold Stories. .com to listen to more of our scary stories collection. Paranormal Untold Stories encourages you to contact us if you have your own untold story that you would like our professionals team to put online as a scary story. Thank you. Please follow our YouTube channel, Paranormal Untold Stories, and encourage others to do the same. Paranormal Untold Stories.